The idea of double-barreled tanks has existed for as long as the concept of the tank itself. Even as far back as the design created by Leonardo da Vinci, which to many is considered the earliest tank design, we see a vehicle featuring numerous weapons. This desire for more firepower is not just understandable, but we see it in virtually every other type of military equipment, from the ships of the line during the Age of Sail and mighty battleships of the 20th century, all the way down to small arms. Why then, if this is such a seemingly desirable characteristic, are these multi-barreled monstrosities basically non-existent outside of works of fiction? Stay tuned as we discuss the topic of why double-barreled tanks don't exist. Considering the fact that double-barrel tanks have seen a fairly recent surge in popularity largely thanks to their inclusion within World of Tanks, it seems only fitting that this video be sponsored by them. If you are new to the tank community and haven't already heard of World of Tanks, it is a free-to-play multiplayer game featuring hundreds of tanks from a variety of nations. You can try it out for yourself using my link below and the code COMBAT to get a special bonus which includes the Tier 6 Premium Cromwell B, 250,000 credits, 7 days of premium account time, and 3 rental tanks for you to try out for 10 battles each. We'll talk a bit more about the game later along with some in-game footage, but for now, let's take a look at the historical instances of double-barreled tank designs. Before we look at any particular vehicles though, we need to set a few ground rules regarding what constitutes a double-barreled tank. If we don't do this, the topic becomes immensely more difficult to discuss. For example, the Panzer I was equipped with a pair of MG-13s as its primary armament, but would this really be considered a double-barreled tank? By definition it is, but that opens the door to just about every other vehicle being a double-barreled tank, as a large number feature coaxial or hull-mounted machine guns. We also would have to consider things such as anti-air vehicles like the Kugelblitz, which feature 2 or more smaller caliber armaments. Although these vehicles do fit the definition of double-barreled tanks, for the sake of this video I will be omitting AA vehicles as well as tanks which feature smaller caliber autocannon type armaments. We also won't be discussing every single double-barrel design in this video, as just from a few hours of research I have uncovered well over 30 designs. However, I will be posting an article to my website, ConeOfArc.com, alongside this video with a full list and timeline if you are interested. Now that we have the general guidelines out of the way, let's finally look at real-world double-barrel tanks. Although everything I have said up to this point, including the thumbnail and title of this video, has made the claim that the double-barrel tank has never been tried, this isn't entirely true. In fact, some of the earliest tanks to ever see combat featured 2 cannon armaments. Once again though, these are hardly what most of us would think of when discussing this topic. The image that immediately springs to mind is more likely a vehicle with both these guns mounted inside of a turret. So although the double-barrel tank can be said to have made its debut in World War I, the first true double-barrel tank would not arrive until the interwar period. Even eliminating the rhomboid designs of the First World War though, it is incredibly difficult to find what the first double-barrel tank is. From my research, the earliest design I can find fitting the criteria we have set is the Soviet T-39 landship designed sometime in the 1920s. However, this vehicle never got past the mock-up stage, as with many of the interwar designs from that period. The earliest example of a tank armed with 2 guns mounted side by side, which was actually built in metal, appears to be the Neubau-Fahrzeug from the mid-1930s. This is actually a vehicle we have previously covered on the channel and is one of only a few double-barreled tanks to actually see combat. Featuring a 7.5cm gun and 3.7cm gun, in theory it provided both infantry support and anti-tank capabilities, but as we will soon discuss, it suffered from the same problems all double-barrel tanks struggle with. This layout of a larger gun and smaller gun is fairly common with real-world double-barrel designs, and also makes up the vast majority of those which actually saw any level of production. It can be argued that these aren't truly double-barreled tanks, but to those trying to argue that, I say, please, for the love of God, stop making this topic harder than it already is to discuss. More seriously though, I feel these are not only safely considered double-barrel tanks, but the fact that multiple were actually built gives us valuable insight into why double-barrel tanks fail despite the theoretical benefits. Famous examples of these types of tanks include the KV-1 prototype, M6 heavy tank, and Mouse. The other variety of double-barreled tank is that of vehicles which feature two guns of the same size mounted side by side within a turret or hull. Real-world examples of these include the T5 Stage 1 prototype, the KV-7, and the VT-11 or 12. You can also include the Australian Sentinel, which mounted two 25-pounders, although this was only done for testing purposes. You have likely seen or heard of at least a few of these, but probably the most well-known examples are of vehicles which never left the drawing board. Chief among these is easily the now iconic ST2, which saw widespread attention after being one of the first double-barreled tanks to be added to World of Tanks. As we can see, there are actually quite a few examples of vehicles mounting two or more cannons, with these being just a small fraction of them. As interesting as these various designs are though, just listing them doesn't answer the question posed at the start of the video. Why are they basically non-existent? The answer can be split into a few different factors, but are all connected to the very reason these concepts seem appealing in the first place: the double-barreled armament. Probably the biggest problem which makes double-barreled tanks impractical in the real world is the space the guns take up. If you have ever been inside a tank or watched some videos of the chieftain crawling around inside of them, you'll know just how cramped the interiors can be. While this does differ from tank to tank, with some being considerably more spacious than others, few, if any, have the additional space inside for a second gun breech. Even those that might be able to squeeze one in would then still need the additional space required for the weapons to be loaded and for other crew positions. Even the semi-successful designs mentioned in this video, which feature a smaller gun alongside the main armament, still ran into this problem to some degree. This brings us to the obvious solution to this problem: simply design the vehicle in a way that resolves the issues. Here lies the next problem which plagues the concept of the double barrel. While it is absolutely doable to design a vehicle to accommodate two guns, it comes at a cost. The need for space requires making the tank larger to allow for additional internal space for the guns, crew, and ammunition. The problem with this is that with size comes weight, one of the most significant limiting factors in tank design. Not only does a larger turret and/or hull increase the weight of the vehicle significantly, many do not realize the shocking amount a tank gun weighs. These can easily weigh in the neighborhood of 2 or more tons. For example, the 120mm many Western MBTs currently carry weighs nearly 4 tons. So while it would perhaps be possible to eliminate some weight through the use of a different recoil mechanism for the twin armament, we are still looking at roughly doubling the weight of our tank's weaponry before we even consider the extra weight from the larger vehicle. Even if we were to build our vehicle in metal and it operated acceptably, we once again begin to run into problems due to this increased size and weight. A bigger, heavier tank becomes more difficult to transport and operate in certain environments, as well as costing more to produce. Wear and tear on the tank is also likely to increase, both from the stress of firing the guns, as well as the additional weight on the turret drive and suspension. Although it is not a double-barrel tank, an example of this can be found in the Sherman Firefly, which had increased wear on the bogey wheels due to the increased weight from the 17-pounder gun. These are, of course, all factors which have been and will continue to be overlooked by various militaries when it comes to vehicle designs. However, these limiting factors will only be overlooked if the vehicle itself provides enough increased value to warrant the trade-offs, and frankly, double-barrel tanks just don't offer this. Although during the earlier days of tank design and even up to the Cold War, double-barrel tanks did provide some tantalizing benefits, these have since been solved by other means. Even during that period, we can see that those potential benefits still proved too little to actually get any of these concepts past limited testing or production, and few ever reached combat. The only exception to these would be vehicles such as the Ontos, but these are a special case given their unique armament. Even then, those sorts of multi-gunned recoilless rifle carriers were fairly short-lived. While theoretically, double-barrel tanks do provide double the firepower and a higher chance of one round impacting your target, this can also be solved with faster reloads and improved fire control systems. We do still see occasional examples of double-barrel systems today, but these are almost exclusively for artillery, where the problems caused by two guns are less severe and the increased payload provides more benefit. Even these are fairly rare though, once again illustrating that this concept is rarely used. As mentioned earlier though, while double-barrel tanks have seen little combat in the real world, the same cannot be said for the virtual world. Thanks to the support of World of Tanks for this video, we have the chance to take a look at the various examples of double-barrel tanks within the game world. With this, we can consider how this concept may have performed in the real world as well as how realistic the different designs are in-game. To start with, let's look at the tanks that started it all, the Soviet double-barrel heavies. Starting us off at Tier 8, we find the aptly named IS-2-2. For the purposes of this video, we will mainly be discussing these vehicles in their fully upgraded configuration, aside from any different armaments available. Right away, I like the way this tank has been designed, with the hull being wider than the standard IS-2. As we discussed earlier, this is one solution to the issue of internal space created by fitting a second gun to the tank. This design aspect also applies to the turret, which has been widened and somewhat redesigned compared to the IS turret. Given the shape and design of the original IS turret, this change would be a necessity in order to fit a second gun. For this vehicle, we are given a choice between two main armaments, either a twin 85mm layout or a twin 100mm layout. I like this design choice as both of these guns are smaller than the famous 122mm used by the Soviets, which is a bit more realistic for a vehicle of this type. Although this vehicle was never built in reality, I think this is a good representation of what a double-barreled IS tank may have looked like, especially with the two 85mm guns. The only questionable part for me is the addition of a second loader to the vehicle, which does make sense to increase the fire rate of the weapons, but would significantly decrease the available space for both loading the guns and ammo for them. This is further decreased by a significantly thicker front turret, although given the shape, I will concede the space may not have provided much benefit otherwise. The same cannot be said for the design we find at Tier 9. Next up, we find the IS-3-2. Similarly to the IS-2-2, the design of the hull compared to the IS-3 is immediately noticeable, but this time not for a good reason. Unlike the IS-2-2, the IS-3-2 does not feature a significantly wider hull. The hull is certainly longer than its single-barreled sibling, but the width remains roughly the same. This is somewhat made up for by the new turret, which is both completely redesigned and much longer, but I am much more skeptical about this being a functional design as it is portrayed. Particularly, I find the increase of the hull armor to 145mm on the front to be a poor choice from a realism standpoint, as this would remove some of the additional space gained by lengthening the hull. The choice of armament also doesn't do any favors with twin 100mm guns or twin 122mm guns. With the additional length and width of the turret compared to the IS-2-2, I won't say these choices are completely impossible, but I do question the feasibility of operating two 122mm guns in such a limited space. Once again, not impossible, as these use two-piece ammunition, which eliminates needing to maneuver a long shell, but the storage space for this ammo would still quickly run out. Overall, I do not like this design as much as the previous, but I will give it credit for showcasing a different method of modifying a design to accept two guns, even if the design itself is not quite realistic in my opinion. Last in this line, we finally come to the Tier 10 ST2. I won't spend too much time on this tank because out of the three we've looked at so far, it is the only one to have any real-life drawings available for, and the in-game tank is clearly designed from these. For that reason, I can't really pick apart the design as being unrealistic outside of criticizing the original design. So for this tank, although it may be a bit boring, I will simply say it is a good example of a strange and otherwise forgotten concept given new life. The same can also be said for the MTLS and SU-2-122, which are both real-world designs, one of which even saw service. This also appears to be the case for an upcoming tank destroyer called the ISU-122-2, although as that has not been released yet, I will save that for a video of its own in the future. This now leaves us with two remaining vehicles to discuss, the TS-54, which I have covered previously on this channel, and the Object 703-2. As I have a full video discussing the TS-54, I won't go into too much detail here, but in that video I found it to be fairly unrealistic, particularly due to the odd side machine guns on the turret. Were it to be a real design, those would almost certainly be eliminated to allow the crew more room. Once again, this is an interesting example of a potential double-barrel tank design, but I feel it falls short of reality. Last but certainly not least, we reach the Object 703 version 2, probably one that many of you have been waiting for. This tank is based on the Object 703, which seems to be one of several names given to prototypes for what would eventually become the IS-3. So in a way, this makes the 703-2 another take on the double-barreled IS-3 concept. This design lacks the pike nose armor layout in the front and also features a wider hull. The turret is not as long as the IS-3-2, but this increased width, at least visually, gives the indication of more space internally, especially with the more conventional frontal armor layout, not angling into the fighting compartment on the corners. I would consider this design similar to the IS-2-2 in terms of a semi-realistic take on the double-barrel concept, with my only gripe once again being the twin 122mm armament choice. The smaller size and overall shape of the turret also causes me to question how ammo storage and crew placement would work, but these factors are hard to judge given as it is a video game, ammo counts are often significantly higher than a real-world design for gameplay reasons. The same can also be said for other factors such as armor thickness, gun depression, and top speed, which is why I did not discuss those in this video. Though many of these I would consider to be fake tanks, many of the World of Tanks double-barreled tanks are actually real-world designs brought back to life within the game. Overall, I actually think that for as much criticism as the double-barreled tanks get in World of Tanks, they are actually fairly good representations of the double-barrel concept. This even somewhat applies to the way they function in the game. The ability to both fire simultaneously or alternate firing of the guns provides a good example of how this type of vehicle could be used. Firing both guns could provide a devastating blow to a target, as well as providing a greater chance to hit your target, or both guns firing individually could allow multiple targets to be engaged more quickly. Once again though, I question the viability of these systems in the real world, as both problems can be solved by other means. For example, if engaging multiple targets quickly is a concern, an autoloader would provide far quicker and consistent fire than having two manually loaded guns. You could argue that a double-barrel auto-loaded system would then provide even more benefits. However, once again, we must consider the additional size and weight this would add to the vehicle. Bear in mind, all of this relating to the World of Tanks designs is simply my opinion based on the few examples we have seen of real-world double-barrel tanks. So to wrap up everything we have discussed today, I think we can confidently answer the question posed at the start of the video. Double-barrel tanks do not exist simply because the benefits they provide are either outweighed by the problems they create or offer solutions that can be solved through other means. I'm curious to know what you think though, so let me know down in the comments. I try to read as many of them as I can and will do my best to reply to some of them within the first couple days of this video being published. I want to give one final thanks to World of Tanks for helping me cover topics like this in a way that I hope is a bit more interesting not just for those of you who like history, but to fans of tank games as well. Don't forget to try the game out for yourself using the link below and code COMBAT to kickstart your journey towards trying the double-barrel tanks for yourself or whatever other vehicle catches your eye. Thanks as always to my ConelyFans for supporting my content and to all of you for watching. If you liked this video and want to see more double barrel content, I highly recommend you follow it up with the Fake Tank Friday episode on the TS-54, which not only discusses the vehicle, but also some of the history I could find surrounding it. Hope to see you there, or in my next video.